Alaikum. Now we will talk about the elections of George W. Bush, the son of former President George Bush, the junior Bush as he is generally known. And Bush energetically in 1992 courted African American Hispanic voters. This was a great change in the election campaigning. Gore tried to craft a political appeal to working families, but political strategists faulted him for running a disorganized campaign that never capitalized on its main asset. The economic successes of the 8 years Clinton presidency, the election day turnout on November 7, 2000, was relatively light, 51% of voters, and Nader's candidacy drew less than 3% of the popular vote, and Bush and Gore finished nearly tied. Following the pattern in place since the Reagan era, the popular vote highlighted the gender, racial, and ethnic imbalances between the two parties. According to exit polls, Bush attracted 54% of the votes cast by men, but only 43% of those from women. He received 38% of his popular votes from Latinos, 37% from Asian Americans, and 9% from African Americans. Gore won the popular vote by about 500,000 ballots. The only vote in this election that mattered, however, was in the Electoral College, and there the result hinged on who had won Florida, where the Republican candidate's brother, Jeb Bush, was governor. So the Bush led in Florida by 930 votes. Gore and individual supporters, however, filed lawsuits alleging that Florida's antiquated voting machines prevented a fair count of all the ballots. And this was the first time that the counting was repeated in the United States of America. The Florida count in the federal court system and several local canvassing boards, following an order from the state Supreme Court, began manual recounts of contested ballots. Both candidates flooded Florida with cadres of lawyers and demonstrators. It almost appears a Pakistani election. 3 days later, after receiving briefs and hearing oral arguments, the court's conservative majority, in order to decide to another 5-4 decisions, declared that conducting manual recounts only in the contested counties violated the Constitution. At this point, Gore conceded defeat, and George W. Bush began assembling a cabinet and a White House staff. The new Bush presidency would be working with a narrow Republican margin in Congress. Republicans still held a slim majority in the House, and the Senate was divided 50-50. And if we see about this between Clinton and the Bush, so they are outsized personalities dominated American political life in 20th century. They are Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton. The Reagan Revolution of the 1980s saw the emergence of a new conservative movement that had been born in the shadow of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. Reagan Republicans distrusted extending federal government's power, advocated sharp tax cuts, and stressed a socio-cultural agenda emphasizing traditional values. During the 1990s, however, the Republican agenda met its match in Bill Clinton, a new Democrat. Clinton blunted the Republican surge by adopting a conservative economic agenda, slashing the federal deficit, reshaping the welfare system, and downsizing the federal bureaucracy. At the same time, he supported other issues heatedly opposed by most Republicans: abortion rights, gun control, affirmative action, and environmental protection. Reagan and Clinton, both charismatic, media-savvy, two-term presidents, inspired intense adoration and passionate dislikes. Together, their administration redrew the political landscape in their shadow. Americans continued to negotiate the different and to find difficult balances among liberty, equality, and power. Bill Gates, who is the Microsoft co-founder, he said in 2007 that as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. So if we see the Americans and their attitudes in 1990s, we think there was a sense of moral self-repair. And at this point of time, I feel that we as citizens, as individuals, as a society also, we also need to think about moral self-repair. Improved crime and other social statistics aside, American politics remained ideological, emotional, and characterized by intense divisions. 1992 presidential elections, when they approached, we have talked about it, and the familiar landmarks were the Cold War and the Berlin Wall to intercontinental missiles and bombers on constant high alert were gone. So basically, a warfare based upon power matching was diminishing. Yet at home, Americans were less sanguine and they faced some familiar problems. The United States found itself in its deepest recession since early 1980s. Many of the job losses were occurring among white-collar workers in middle management positions. And you know, in economy, it's always the middle management and the middle class that suffers. President George Bush and Vice President Don Quayle easily won re-nomination by the Republican Party. On the Democratic side, Bill Clinton, governor of Arkansas, defeated a crowded field of candidates to win his party's nomination. As his vice presidential nominee, he selected Senator Al Gore of Tennessee, who is generally acknowledged as one of the Congress' strongest advocates of environmental protection. The Bush re-election effort was built around a set of ideas traditionally used by incumbent experience interests. George Bush, who was 68, the last of a line of presidents who had served in World War II, faced a young challenger in Bill Clinton, who at age 46 had never served in the military and had participated in protest against the Vietnam War. In emphasizing his experience as president and commander-in-chief, Bush drew attention to Clinton's inexperience at the national level. But as we have talked about Bill Clinton, that he organized his campaign around another of the oldest and most powerful themes in electoral politics, youth and change. And these two things always attract the voter. And as we have seen that Clinton proved to be a highly effective communicator, not least on television, a medium that highlighted his charm and intelligence. Clinton is a great speaker. Clinton won elections on November 3rd as the 42nd President of the United States, but his closest collaborator was his wife, Hillary Rodham Clinton. In the campaign, he had equipped that those who voted for him got two for the price of one. And Clinton launched a new domestic policy, and that policy was to achieve a national health plan, proved to be a far larger setback because it was found to be too expensive. And Clinton was more successful on another matter with great repercussion for the domestic economy. The previous president, George Bush, had negotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, to establish fully open trade between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. These were the first indications of a growing movement on the left wing of American politics against the vision of an integrated world economic system. And Clinton nonetheless accepted the argument that open trade was ultimately beneficial to all parties. The election campaign in 1994 were under underway, and although the administration already had made numerous foreign policy decisions, issues at home were clearly most important to the voters. In November, the voters gave the Republicans control of both houses of Congress for the first time since the election of 1952. Many observers believe that Bill Clinton would likely be a one-term president, apparently making a decision to conform to new political realities. Clinton instead moderated his political course. Policy initiatives for the remainder of his presidency were few. Contrary to Republican predictions of doom, the tax increase of 1993 did not get in the way of a steadily improving economy. So the president also co-opted part of the Republican program in his State of the Union address of January 1996. He declared, "The era of big government is over." That summer, on the eve of the presidential campaign, he signed a major welfare reform bill that was essentially a Republican project designed to end permanent support for most welfare recipients and move them to work. It was opposed by many in his own party. By and large, it would prove successful in operation over the next decade. And if we see that how the American economy worked in 1990s, it simply not only recovered from the brief but sharp recession of the Bush presidency, but it was entering into a new era of booming prosperity. Less than 20 years after its introduction, the familiar items were coming not only simply in business of offices of all types, and those were the PCs, personal computers. Today all of you have one. But in homes throughout America. So this, the cost of a good refrigerator, it became a common appliance in American homes. Instant communication it brought, and lightning fast data manipulation speeded up the tempo of many businesses. And a final impetus was turn of the millennium, a huge push to upgrade outdated computing equipment that might not recognize the year 2000 brought data technology spending to a peak. This technological advancement or availability, to say so, made many things easy for Americans who were more inclined to enjoy the ride while it lasted than to plan for a coming bust. The election of 1996 and the political aftermath, we know that he had promised to build a bridge to the 21st century, easily defeated Dole in a three-party race. Clinton never stated much of a domestic program for his second term. The highlight of its first year was an accord with Congress designed to balance the budget, further reinforcing the president's standing as a fiscally responsible, moderate liberal. And if we just see and analyze that whatever the merits of the approach, a majority of Americans seem to view the matter as a private one to be sorted out with one's family, a significant shift in public attitude. Also significantly, Hillary Clinton continued to support her husband. It surely helped also that the times were good. In the midst of the House impeachment debate, the president announced the largest budget surplus in 30 years. Public opinion polls showed Clinton's approval rating to be the highest of his 6 years in office. So that November, the Republicans took further losses in the midterm congressional elections, and the razor thin margins made it a great impact on the American economy to progress and to move to a better future assessment. Thank you so much.